To see you. How are you? I feel great. I was well, thank you.
Donald Trump sent his representative to Kyiv today for delicate negotiations about selling Patriot air defense missiles, as well as to address the issue of reviving peace talks with the Russians. Officially, Zelensky only stated that today in Kyiv he met with Donald Trump's former special representative, Kellogg. The parties discussed the intensification of Russian strikes and protection against them, in particular the possibility of selling Patriot missiles and the development of Ukrainian ballistic missiles. And on the same day, the German foreign minister also arrived in Kyiv, who discussed the same topic with Ukrainian officials. Kellogg himself visited not only Kyiv, but also Odessa to see with his own eyes the destruction that the Russians inflicted on the port infrastructure. But unofficially, there are completely different versions about the real reasons for Kellogg's visit. For example, that Kellogg left the Russian negotiation track last year, but he didn't necessarily leave the Ukrainian one. And also, that after Steve Witkoff's failure, Donald Trump might be betting on alternative negotiators, since that very Witkoff and Jared Kushner are expected to visit Moscow soon. And if the result is zero this time as well, something needs to change. Or Kellogg simply arrived in Kiev to show the White House's solidarity with Ukraine on the eve of Independence Day. So, let's discuss what's really happening and why Kellogg arrived in Kiev today. My name is Alexey Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the episode while you're watching, and be sure to leave any comment under this video. This is very important for the platform. Subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. So, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said today, and I quote, "I met with General Kellogg, who came from Odessa to Kyiv to participate in our Veterans Forum. I thank you for this respect for Ukrainian warriors who defend Ukraine and the entire Euro-Atlantic space every day under extremely difficult conditions." Zelensky said that together with Kellogg, he discussed the intensification of Russian strikes on infrastructure and civilians and emphasized that the main priority is anti-ballistic defense. In particular, the president of Ukraine spoke about the work of Ukraine and Europe on their own anti-ballistic system. But he noted that without interceptor missiles for the Patriot missile defense system, it will be impossible to manage this winter, so the country is ready to buy them from the United States of America. He said, "We don't need help, just sell us these missiles." I should note here that on the very same day, the German foreign minister, Johann Wadephul, also arrived in Kiev. He stated that Germany is actively negotiating with its European allies and the United States of America to help Ukraine specifically with missiles for the Patriot air defense systems. Next is his quote. "This is a crucial question for the future of Europe, how this war will end. It must end in such a way that the rule of law prevails, not the law of the jungle." As you can see, it's not just me who considers Russians to be savages, but even the German foreign minister. I won't get ahead of myself here. We'll discuss this topic with you in a separate episode on this YouTube channel. But here I'll say that today Germany is allocating 12 billion euros specifically for missile weaponry. In addition, Germany has started negotiations to purchase missiles from 2 out of 3 manufacturers, whose developments Berlin plans to use to create a new arsenal of long-range weapons. According to documents from the German Ministry of Defense, we are talking about missiles. The Anthem missile from an American-Israeli startup, Bars missiles from an unnamed Ukrainian company, and Flamingo missiles, again Flamingo, from the Ukrainian company Firepoint. The German side expects to receive the first samples of 2 out of the 3 selected systems for qualification as early as next year and is preparing framework contracts for their subsequent serial production. The new affordable cruise missile is expected to become part of the German long-range weapons program, and deliveries to the troops are planned to begin as early as 2027. In the documents, it is described as a cost-effective weapon and, above all, suitable for mass production, which is intended to be used simultaneously with more expensive missiles. But let's discuss this topic in more detail in the next episode. Now let's discuss why and for what purpose former Trump special envoy Kit Kellogg arrived in Kyiv. But first, a little background. Back in 2025, as reported by American media, Vladimir Putin in fact personally chose the negotiators from the United States of America, and he rejected Kit Kellogg's candidacy, considering him too pro-Ukrainian. And Trump then agreed with Putin and removed Kit Kellogg from that position. Instead, the Kremlin bet on Steven Witkoff, a longtime golf partner of Trump, who visited Russia 6 times in 2025, but never once went to Ukraine. At the same time, Kit Kellogg formally stepped down as special envoy at the end of last year. But according to all official reports, he left because he was disappointed by how his colleagues in the Trump administration fell for Russia's tricks. The official reason for Kit Kellogg's visit to Kyiv today is to participate in the prayer breakfast and ceremonies for Ukraine's Independence Day. But there's more to it than that, and I should note right away that, according to American officials, Vladimir Putin rejected Kit Kellogg specifically as a negotiator with Moscow. But Kit Kellogg could still remain the person responsible for US relations with Kyiv itself. Steven Witkoff and Jared Kushner became the channel specifically to the Kremlin, but that doesn't mean Washington stopped dealing with Ukraine directly. It's just that this function could have remained with Kit Kellogg. But Witkoff will remain the envoy to Moscow, and as we can see, he isn't eager to go to Kyiv. But there's something much more interesting here. The expected visit of Steven Witkoff and Jared Kushner to Moscow has not been confirmed yet. The day before, Putin's aide Ushakov stated, quote, "Nothing is planned at the moment. In principle, such a visit is possible, but that's all." The Russians insist that, considering the exchange of long-range strikes on the territories of Russia and Ukraine, now is not the time for negotiations at all. But that's just something the Russians came up with themselves. And so it turns out that while the Russian track is stalling and stuck in uncertainty, Washington is sending to Kyiv exactly the person whom Moscow itself rejected as being too pro-Ukrainian, in order to discuss specific military assistance. This can be read as a signal that, if the negotiation track through Steven Witkoff is not moving, support for Ukraine continues and is being discussed directly, regardless of whether Witkoff comes to Moscow or not. So, Kellogg's visit looks like this. It's a symbolic occasion, meaning the anniversary of Ukraine's independence. It provided a convenient formal trigger for the visit, which in substance is about discussing air defense and ballistic missiles. Discussion of investments and port security serves the function of support in Ukraine, precisely at the moment when the parallel negotiation track with Moscow through Steven Witkoff is in limbo. That is, Kit Kellogg is exactly the figure who can play that role. Not as someone who revives negotiations, but on the contrary, tries to understand what needs to be given to Kyiv in order to strengthen Kyiv and prevent Moscow from turning the tide of the war, so that Kyiv can enter negotiations from a stronger position. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. Also, friends, I wanted to ask you, the subscribers, what do you think? Should I go back to shorter formats or keep making these 15 to 20 minute episodes? Or should I release short episodes, just one news item, a quick breakdown, straight to the facts and move on? Let me know your opinion in the comments. That's all for now, take care of yourselves, see you all next time.